Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. This week has been incredibly rough and frustrating. Saturday evening, my mom had to go to the hospital. She came down with pneumonia. She stayed in the hospital until Wednesday afternoon. I went with her to the hospital Saturday and stayed until Sunday afternoon, and then returned on Monday morning and stayed until Wednesday afternoon. During that time, I took two different bags of books with me to while away the time while she was recovering from her pneumonia. She is back home and she is doing quite well. There are some changes that I have to adapt to, though, and that's been a rather interesting process, to say the least. Anyway, my original plan for this reading week was to focus on books for October, the new BookTube event dedicated to cephalopods. So, over the course of the weekend, I was going to reread two books in the animal series from Reaction Books. Squid by Martin Wallen and Octopus by Richard Schweid. And then over the course of the work week, I was going to read The Lives of Octopuses and Their Relatives, A Natural History of Cephalopods by Danna Staaf from the Lives of series from Princeton University Press. To give you a quick overview of the Animal series by Reaction Books, these are short, comprehensive looks at various animals, usually groups of animals, but sometimes single species. These books include biology, natural history, the history of the study of the animal, cultural criticism of the animal, or the animal's sort of representations in human culture, and the exploitability of the animal. Sometimes some of these books are more of one thing than the other. One of these books is, or two of them actually, I think, are, for all intents and purposes, just cultural criticism, while others are more heavily focused on the biology or the history of the study than anything else. So, I guess I could still keep both of these. So part of my goal for rereading these two books was not just to participate in October, but also to reignite my interest in the animal series from Reaction Books. I was rather fond of these books briefly for a few years ago, about 2001, 2002. But over the last 2 years, my attempts at reading some of these books have failed miserably. I'm not as big a fan as I was. And so I was hoping to reignite that interest. So I started my reread of Squid, and it went poorly. The book starts with the history of the study of squids. And I just found it dull. These books are, to a large extent, not written by experts. They're more deadline prose, I guess you could say, or ephemeral writing, probably more like deadline prose in book form. And so sometimes the author is not quite expert on what they're writing about, which is probably why some of these are more cultural criticism than, say, biology or something. So I wasn't enjoying this reread attempt. And I set it aside into the second or beginning of the third chapter, and decided to not even bother with Octopus. So my plan was to start Octopus on Sunday, but my mom went into the hospital, so this was one of the books that was in the first bag of books. So the Lives of series is more focused on science than the other things that the Animal series does. And so what this book does is it introduces cephalopods and cephalopod biology, and then breaks things down by environment and looks at certain aspects of how the environment affects cephalopods, what kind of evolutionary tricks cephalopods who live in certain environments have come up with to survive. And at the end of each chapter, there are selections or select little notes on various species that live in these different environments, although they're mostly from Australia. And some of the really big name cephalopods are not included. So I made it about 100 and something pages in having started the book on Saturday evening and gave up on it on Sunday morning, early Sunday afternoon. And I think this kind of book is just not for me. I mean, I'm going to keep it because I like the pictures, and some of the snippets of information in short doses probably would work, but as a dedicated reading experience for me, I'm just not really all that into it. So then I decided to try, for Framed in September, Manga, A New History of Japanese Comics by Eike Exner, and did not make it past the first few sentences of the introduction. I knew immediately I was not going to get on with this book at this time, so yeah. I set it down and moved on to Theory and Practice by Michel de Krester. I'd originally planned on reading this book as part of a trio of books for Shorty September. One of the prompts for Shorty September was to read a book and do a deep dive on the subject. And I decided to do that on Virginia Woolf. I wanted to reread Mrs. Dalloway after about 20 years, and then reread The Hours by Michael Cunningham after about, well over 20 years, and then read this book. And things did not go well. I ended up bailing on Mrs. Dalloway, and since you really need to have read, or in this case reread Mrs. Dalloway before The Hours, I couldn't read The Hours. And I just decided to put this aside as well. But as I was building my first bag of books, I thought I might as well take this with me. And so I did. Now, Theory and Practice begins with an Australian geologist who is traveling in Europe and remembering back to his childhood on an Australian farm. This opening section of about 20 pages is a non-starter novel from the narrator of the rest of the book, who is a novelist. or will become a novelist. But over the course of the novel, she is or for most of it, she is a graduate student in Melbourne doing a dissertation on 3 novels by Virginia Woolf, who the narrator idolizes. While her advisor is trying to get her to focus on theory, which in the 80s was all the rage. About not quite midway through the book, the narrator reads a passage from Virginia Woolf's diary in which she goes on a racist diatribe against Sri Lankans. The narrator is herself a Sri Lankan immigrant to Australia, and this discovery upends the narrator's view of Virginia Woolf and her work. And for, I'm assuming, much of the rest of the novel, the narrator is struggling with trying to come to terms with this discovery and what Virginia Woolf means to her now. At the same time, she is involved with a young man in a friends with benefits relationship, while he is in a relationship with another young woman that he is describing as a deconstructed relationship. Whether that's his way of saying, I'm actually dating this one woman, but I'm calling this a deconstructed relationship so I can get away with having a friends with benefits relationship, or both relationships are friends with benefits. I'm not entirely sure. I never got far enough to actually figure that out. I gave up on the novel about 70, certainly not quite 80 pages in, so not quite halfway through. I think the novel is disjointed. There are no chapter breaks, so the scenes are broken up by like the separation of text and a star in the middle, with some scenes being several pages long and some scenes being just a paragraph or two long. So I found the novel quite disjointed. And I also never got a sense of emotional connection to anything. The narrator just, like, there was no emotional attachment or feeling. I did not read the devastation of the discovery that an author you idolize has terrible beliefs, or had terrible beliefs. It just, I didn't see it. I didn't read it. And the relationship with the young man, I did not read the lust for him, the emotional attachment, the so-called jealousy. Why she broke up with him. It's like things happening to happen, but there's no emotional connection to it. And since, as far as I can tell, there's not really much plot, this is more of a character development. That why the characters are doing things in what I would sometimes call the characters doing stupid shit because the plot needs them to do that stupid shit, even though the character probably wouldn't do this if the plot didn't need them to do it. It bugged me. And I'm incredibly frustrated because I really wanted to like this book. I think I'm in a phase I'm not entirely sure what I'm in right now. There's a part of me that I'm in that phase where I'm wanting to re-engage with the part of my library that I call classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. And So there's part of me that wants to engage with it, that wants to like it. And yet when I do read it or attempt to read it, it doesn't work on me. I'm like, it's just, I don't enjoy it. And so I don't know what to do. And so this was and still is incredibly frustrating. And I don't know what to do about it. Eventually, hopefully, I will figure it out. Or what, I don't know. But it is what it is. So after that, I went home Sunday evening and got a breather, refreshed, and came back to the hospital on Monday. And when I came back on Monday, I brought another bag of books, which featured 4 3-volume omnibus volumes of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. One Piece is one of it's a long-running manga series. It's nearing 30 years. It's incredibly popular, has been for decades, and is about a young man named Monkey D. Luffy, who, as a young boy, was a mascot for a pirate crew captained by red-haired Shanks. On their penultimate visit to Luffy's home village, Luffy ate one of the red-haired pirate's treasures, devil fruit that gave Luffy the ability to, that turned his body into rubber. Devil fruits are fruits that grant their consumers superhuman abilities at the expense of being able to swim or be in water. So 10 years after Shanks' last visit to Luffy's village, Luffy himself sets out to become a pirate and seek out the One Piece, a fabled treasure that is believed to grant its discoverer the right to call themselves the King of the Pirates. So Luffy goes and builds a crew that quickly becomes a found family, which is very often a theme of shonen manga. And they go on numerous adventures, often righting wrongs and fighting corruption, either from even pirates who are significantly worse than they are. I'm not entirely sure Luffy really understands what being a pirate is, because he doesn't really do much pirating, unless you count robbing other pirates. I think it's more he and his crew tend to fight more malicious pirates and steal their treasure than stealing other people's treasure. But anyway, so they're on this grand adventure, and in these volumes begins with the conclusion of the Thriller Bark arc, where Luffy and his crew meet a living skeleton named Brook and encounter a gigantic pirate ship called Thriller Bark, captained by one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Gecko Moria, who has a zombie theme. What he does is he has the ability to manipulate shadows. So he steals shadows from his victims and implants them into corpses, animating them and creating zombies. The Straw Hats are his latest victims, and they fight back and defeat Gecko Moria in the first volume, volume 49. I read volumes 49 through 57. I did not read all 4 of them this week. And then after Moria's defeat, Brook joins the crew, and they proceed to the Sabaody archipelago so that they can get their ship coded so that they can proceed to Fishman Island and enter the second half of the Grand Line, the New World. So how the One Piece world works, if I understand it correctly, is there is a thin circumnavigating continent called the Red Line that sort of separates the world. So I guess think of it as like the prime meridian into, I think it's the international date line, like that. Or say the Americas connected to Antarctica, which is connected to Africa, which is then connected to Europe, and then connected to the Americas with an Arctic that is itself a landmass rather than just ice. At the equator, I'm guessing, is the Grand Line. So the tropics would be the Grand Line with some space north and south of it that's called the Calm Belt. And then the world is further divided into oceans. So the East Blue, West Blue, North Blue, South Blue. So One Piece begins in the East Blue and then moves into, for much of the first part, the part of the Grand Line called Paradise. And so all of the second half of One Piece is going to take place in the part of the Grand Line called the New World, which is far rougher, far more dangerous than the rest of the world. So at the Subbody archipelago, the Straw Hats have incurred the wrath of the celestial dragons. They are descendants of the 20 royal families who formed the world government centuries ago and gave up their kingdoms to move to the capital city of the world called in these volumes it's Mary Joya, but I'm thinking it's probably pronounced like Mary Joyzy, which is the official way of actually moving from Paradise to the New World. The less official way is to go through Fishman Island. So the Straw Hats incur the wrath of the Celestial Dragons because 2 of the 3 get the tar beaten out of them justly. The Celestial Dragons are, almost to an individual, the most evil people in this series, without the power usually to back it up. So the Celestial Dragons call in an admiral, in this case Kizaru, to hunt down the Straw Hats, and he fights every pirate he sees. Also engaging the Straw Hats is Kuma, who at the end of the arc sends the Straw Hats away. In order of joining the crew, Zoro goes to an island with a ruined castle. Nami is sent to a floating island. Usopp is sent to an island with giant bugs. Sanji is sent to an island populated by drag queens. Chopper is sent to a island ruled by birds. Nico Robin is sent to a giant bridge that is being constructed by slave labor. Frankie is sent to a frozen island with cyborg animals. And Brooke is sent to an island in which some inhabitants are being preyed upon by a tribe of people with long arms. And Luffy himself is sent to an island populated by Amazons, where he befriends many of them and becomes friends with their empress, one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Boa Hancock, who falls in love with Luffy. She agrees to help Luffy return to Sabaody, and it's there that he realizes that his adoptive brother Ace has been captured and is set to be executed. So Luffy then changes his plans and decides to break into and pull down the most dangerous prison in the world to try to rescue Ace. He goes and has causes a ruckus, massive prison breakout, and releases several characters who in earlier arcs were enemies of the Straw Hats. Buggy the Clown, Sir Crocodile, and several members of Baroque Works. And he also meets Jimbei, one of the 7 warlords of the sea who is opposed to not so much Ace's execution, but what that entails. And so they break out and head to Marineford, where the execution is going to take place. This is where the Navy, the Marines have their headquarters to stop Ace's execution and rescue him. And Ace is a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, who are not going to sit idly by and let Ace be executed. So at the end of the volumes that I read and the volumes that I did not get to, there is a massive war between the Marines, the 7 warlords of the sea who are remaining loyal and actually showed up, and the pirates, both the Whitebeard pirates as well as the escapees from and pulled down. And so there's a huge amount of fighting at the end. Okay, so I'm going to show you some images, particularly from this one. I want to show you the ending of this volume, these 3 volumes. That is Luffy really beating the snot out of St. Charlos, one of the celestial dragons. Really fun. I had a lot of fun with these volumes, but I don't know, it's like I mentioned several times, lately manga is the only thing that has really pleased me. But I want my reading to be a lot more diverse, more encompassing than just manga. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself all that well. So, anyway, so while I enjoyed these volumes immensely, it's just, I don't know. And that's one of my other frustrations for this week, is I don't really know how to balance, I think. I want a more balanced reading diet, but how my reading life works is that I tend to, one thing or one group of books tends to please me, and until they don't, and then something else will come up. But yeah, right now it is manga, and I have pretty much hundreds of volumes of manga, and I've read pretty much all of it, and I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to go from here, although that is a subject for a video that I would like to get to, as well as talking about bailing, and bail redemptions, even though I think I did that last week or the week before, because I did manage to read some books for Shorty September that I didn't really like. So anyway, so I think today and over this weekend and maybe into the work week, depending how things work out, I'm going to give a bail redemption to The Golden Road by William Dalrymple, and hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, I will of course report back on next Friday with what exactly I did manage to read for weekly reads. So my plans for next week, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if there's anything that I really want to harp on. I mean, maybe trying to figure out where I'm going to go for with manga, as many of the series that I've been actively collecting come to conclusions, and trying to keep up the momentum. But otherwise, I'm really not entirely sure. I guess I could also focus heavily on book tags, because I have missed quite a number of book tags over the last week. But I'm starting to ramble now, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. Upload this video, put the books back where they belong, and I will see you next week with hopefully videos every day. But I say that every week and it never quite happens, so hopefully I do. Until I see you next time, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and have a great weekend, and please stay safe.